everyone, and welcome to another edition of the vAuto podcast. I'm Lance Helgeson. I'll be your host for today's podcast. Today, I'm delighted to have Brian Wieland, the used car director from the Horn Auto Group in Plymouth, Wisconsin, joining us today. Brian, how are you today?
Excellent. How are you doing?
I am very well, thank you. Very well. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us for the conversation. And I guess maybe as a place to start the conversation, Brian, could you tell us a little bit about the dealership group? I think our listeners kind of like to put our people on the map a little bit in terms of number of stores, sales, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so we started in 1966. Joe Van Horn started a single point Chevrolet store in Plymouth, Wisconsin, a small town of about 8,000 people. And, over the years, we've grown into a nice organization. We've got 18 locations in Wisconsin and Iowa. We employ right around 600 people. And over the last 5-10 years, we've really gained some momentum. We've acquired some nice stores. We're doing a decent volume out of our markets. And we have a really, really solid team that we really invest in. And so, yeah, things are good, and we continue to gain some momentum.
And your role there, Brian, for our listeners, you oversee the used vehicle operations across the group, correct?
Yeah, correct. So my role as the used car director is basically everything used. So I source the vehicles, right? I find the used cars wherever they are in the market, and then I oversee 7 buyers. I call them procurement specialists, and they work directly for me, and they are split up by platform. So I have a GM buyer, a Ford buyer, a Stellantis buyer, a Hyundai buyer, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And those guys have an intimate, relationship with the product and the stores. And then so they go out and find the vehicles wherever they are and acquire them. And then I also oversee the pricing strategies, the wholesale strategies, transportation, inventory, merchandising, marketing, all that good stuff. So it's a big job. We certainly have a large used car inventory, so it's a lot of work, but I love it. And so I've kind of got my hand on a lot of different things. So Sure. Really everything used cars.
Yep. Long hours. I imagine too.
Yeah, phone's always ringing.
Yep. So in terms, how much volume do you guys do on a month across the group in used cars?
Well, for used cars, I ran some of the numbers just before this, just so I had kind of a good base of it. So in 2019, which was, I would say, the last kind of normalized year, total sales, vehicle sales was 21,918. That included wholesale. When you take the wholesale out, we did 17,360 retail deals. Of that, 5,135 were new, and 12,225 were used. So, our ratio of used to new is like 3 to 1. So we've always been more focused on the used car than anything. And that's just because, in smaller markets, the manufacturers don't necessarily give us a lot of inventory, right? So if we call the factory up and say we need 10 heavy duty trucks, they're going to say, well, get in line. And by the way, you're like last in line, right? So if we want the inventory, we got to go get it on the used side.
Yep.
And then in 2020, slightly lower volume, 19,359, about 2,898 were wholesale. Obviously, we kept more units in 2020 because they were harder to get. And then retail was 16,459. The thing is year over year, we increased our used by over 2,000 retail units. So we were at 14,652 used in 2020. And again, that was just, more of a factor of there just not being a lot of new car inventory. And we were able to acquire a lot of used inventory during the pandemic, where a lot of people were kind of sitting tight, maybe even running away from the auctions. I was pounding it. I was buying everything that I could if it was a good value. So so year over year we were up and used.
Interesting. Nice. Now, and I guess on the point of if it was a good value when you were out buying stuff, did you have to redefine what that meant given the way the market was at the time?
Yeah. So, I really, really tried to study the market and You kind of have to go gut feeling a little bit sometimes over the analytics, but mostly for me, it's the analytics, it's the data. And so I'm always looking at, the reports that are out and everything that I can read when all the business news and things like that to kind of figure out where I'm at. And, sometimes you just take a step back and you go, is this thing really worth this? And if it is, you just got to buy it. And so during the pandemic, I thought stuff really got cheap, and it did. And then when the economy cranked back up and people started going back out into the world, then we had the inventory to say, hey, we've got it, and it's still a good deal. Come get it. And then next thing you know, we're running out of inventory just like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Well, speaking of inventory acquisition, I think that's really remained kind of a headline story in used cars, across the country. You talked a little bit about auctions. I'm kind of curious, to what degree have you guys maybe put a greater emphasis on getting inventory from customers, whether they want to sell you a car only, or whether, they're coming in to trade something?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think already 2 or 3 years ago, I had this in the back of my mind that I wanted to shift away from the auctions a little bit. And the reasoning is, you're paying a higher fee. The fees, are kind of cranking up here and there, and you have to wait for the transportation companies. And so by the time you got that car, it's going to be several days old, and you still haven't seen it yet. So already a couple of years ago, I was thinking about this. And so we started implementing different strategies. And basically, it's just kind of widening the net, right? The sourcing net. So I want to be able to acquire inventory from every possible source out there, whether that's auction, that's OVE, Manheim Express, body shops, direct from the manufacturer, direct from customers, up in Canada. It doesn't matter where it is. I just want that net to be wide. So we started doing these buying events where we would market to the public that we were just going to buy vehicles, and you don't even come into a dealership. We just wanted to keep it out of the dealership. Don't come in, no hassles. Nobody's going to try to sell you anything. And we had some success doing that. And so now our process is, if we need inventory, and we always do, we're doing different marketing campaigns, and we're talking directly to our customers. We have a KBB buying center. I have local buyers that will strictly buy from the public in this area. So they're very good at it, whether it's Craigslist or it's, Facebook Marketplace, or it's the ICO customers. So we've gotten pretty good at buying locally, and it's helping to keep our lots full.
Now, so those buyers you just referenced, Brian, that's part of that team of 7 that you talked about. So are they exclusively looking at, say, the alternative places, not auctions? Is that kind of how they're set up to work?
Yeah. So on top of that 7, I have 2 more guys that's all that they do. Okay. And so again, I want them to know their craft and really be good at it. So, I give them, I compensate them to do a really good job in that, that area. And last month, in fact, one of my buyers did 51 deals, which is a lot. That's a lot for a local guy that's just doing curb buys and street buys. And so I'm really proud of that. And we seem to be doing very well with it. I know it doesn't sound like a big number, but 51, purchases from customers on the street, that's a pretty good job.
Is that just for the one individual, or was that kind of across the group?
Nope, just him, just the one guy.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about, you mentioned the buying center and Kelley Blue Book Instant Cash Offer. How do those fit into the way you're engaging customers for these to buy their cars? And I'm also curious to what degree that might have, caused a slight change or shift in how you appraise cars.
Yeah, so there's, essentially there's kind of 3 different tools under one roof in Kelley Blue Book. And so starting with the buying center, you're just basically targeting the people that say, I just have a car, right? I want to sell that car. I maybe don't want to buy anything, but I just want a value. I want to know what it's worth, and I want to know if it's worth my time to come and sell it. So then I put those people with a buyer. Okay. And so that way it's really easy. You get them the number, no screwing around. We'll cut the check, come on in. It's super easy, and we've had success with that. Then you have the KBB ICO, which is essentially what we rolled out across all of our stores for the trade-in process. Okay. Reasoning is because, We want to have a consistent process at all of our stores where a consumer can come in, whether they have an '05 Malibu or a 2020 Malibu, they're going to get the same consistent appraisal process.
Mm-hmm.
And KBB ICO has that, right? You're going to put them through that same process, and then it's going to spit out a number to them, and it's not anybody else's number. It's Kelley Blue Book's number. Everybody knows Kelley Blue Book, and then from there you continue to work your deal. But if you have all these different people coming up with all these different numbers and everybody's got a different trade process, it's not consistent, and consumers find that to be frustrating, right? So it's the same process at every store, every salesperson, every manager goes through that ICO process. And then the trade-in advisor has helped us to make the process easier online. So if a consumer goes, to our website and they don't want to go through that 5-10 minute KBB ICO process, they might use that trade-in advisor to get a range. And then that way they can go, okay, I think my car's worth 10 to 12 grand. That's fine. Let's move forward to the next piece of the puzzle or the process. So those are those three different pieces that kind of work together. And I think it's been working really good. We continue to tweak how we're doing it, and we continue to look at our look to book numbers and our trade appraisals to trades taken in, and are we maximizing that process? And the results have been very good over the last 2 years. We continue to see great results with it.
Let me ask you this, Brian. If we looked at that then and now, that 2-year window you just referenced, what was the look to book when you started this effort, and where is it today?
It's a great question, and I follow it very closely. And so a couple of years ago, and I don't know the exact month, but I said, you know what, we're missing inventory, whether it be from new cars or used cars. These people are coming in, and the reason this happened is when I started doing these local buying events, customers were coming in, and I'd put the appraisal, and it would pop up that they were at our store a month, 6 months ago, a year ago. I go, hey, this person was at our store, right? So then I would look at the appraisal and I would go, well, how come we were giving this customer $2,000 less than what it was really worth? So I go, hold on a second. So then I would buy the car from the customer for $2,000 more. When we had an opportunity to sell that person a car, but the trade got in the way. So then, my wheels are spinning, and I'm like, this is not right. Like, I'm buying their car when they should have traded it in, right? So I said, I'm going to do this look to book thing, and I came up with the metrics and the goals that I wanted to get. We were at about 33% then, 33 to 35%.
Okay. Yeah.
And I said, that's not acceptable. I think we can be at 50. And now the new number is 60. And last month we were at 59.6%.
Wow.
So we're almost a doubling of inventory. And so we're acquiring now through that trade process somewhere around 600 to 700 a month, which really keeps the lots full and also takes pressure off of the buying team.
Yeah.
So that's a huge thing.
So from a macro view then, what was the percentage 2 years ago of auction cars of your inventory versus stuff you trade-ins and things you acquired, and what does that percentage look like today?
So I mean, if you just kind of follow those numbers, the percentage of what we were buying at the auction was 60-70%, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Then you have street buys and you have some other ways that we acquire inventory, lease returns and things like that, but call it like 60%, and now that's flipped a little bit. And so now there's not so much pressure to go out and take the risks at the auction when, to be honest with you, there's not really much you get when you buy a car at the auction, right? You're not getting a customer, you're not getting a lot of support. And if you get the car back, you just spent all that money to get it here. Chances are you're not going to send it back if you don't have to, right? But in the trade process, you gain a customer, you possibly get some service later in its life, you can, hopefully you get a trade in that, in that process again. And so it's kind of like, there's just so much more value to selling a car to a customer and getting a trade than having to go out to the auction and buy all those cars. And that might sound pretty self-explanatory, but when you look at the numbers, you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't really make sense. We're going to the auction and buying all these cars when we could just be getting them from our customers. Yeah,
well, that's a very strong testimony to a turnaround there in terms of the way that has changed for you. So tell me this, what's the cost? I'm curious if you've seen any, the market's been a little bit wacky, wholesale values are up, have been up. But if you looked at your appraisal process, the standardization using kind of ICO as the foundation for that, what's the cost to market on average for those cars? And has that changed much, let's say, over the last 16, 17 months?
Yeah, so I gauge that right on my look to book, and because I want to know, well, what am I putting into my cars, or what am I showing the customers, and am I getting enough? And so when we started, we were at like 85%, right? Okay. That's what we were acquiring for. And if you look at a trade is a lower cost piece of inventory, and it usually has a better market day supply and a quicker turn. Why? Because I can get it on day one. I could sell it the next day if I wanted to. And typically trades they're not late model. They're 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. So in order to get more, I was telling my stores, hey, I'm at the auction paying 90%, 95%, 100% to get inventory, and we're showing our customers 85. Let's flip that around a little bit. Let's give our customers more, and let's pay all the money for the trade, so then I can go to the auction and I can just steal stuff if I need it, right? So that's kind of the flip in the mentality. So we're somewhere around that 89, 90, 91, 93%, depending upon what it is. And if it's, something super desirable or it's hot in the market, we might go all the way up to 100, 105. That's kind of where the gut kind of comes in on some of that stuff. And we all know what the car is, right? The one that comes through where you're like, I got to get this thing. I just got to throw the book out the window.
Now, I had two points related to the appraisal process. The way I kind of understand it, it's a little more customer friendly, more transparent. So to what degree are you moving away from the initial number that's shared with the customer in the, like let's say it's 15 grand, that's the number that you present to them, or that ICO shows. How often are you diverting from that as a result of the customer or the need to make a deal? How are you managing that?
It's a good question, and I don't know what the actual percentages or the numbers would be, but oftentimes we do have to go off of that number. So we present the customer with the ICO, and we simply say, are you ready to purchase the vehicle? And I would say most of the time the trade is that friction point where the customer is going to want more money, and it's just a natural reaction. When I'm buying something, it's the same way. Can I get a better deal, or whatever it may be? And so I would say it's a lot. But the nice thing about the ICO is you can be the hero then. So then you can go back to the desk and you can say, all right, so what's this thing really worth? You can go back out there, give the customer a little bit more money, and now you look like the hero. And not saying that you're saying that Kelly Blue Book doesn't know or anything like that. You just get to go out there and say, congratulations, I can get you a little bit more money. And of course, right now with inventory, you can do that on almost every car. Right, because we need it. So and I love that. I love being able to start a little bit lower and then go out and say, you know what, I can give you the money. Your car is worth it. Congratulations. That's a good feeling to be able to do that.
And it sounds like it's even with a slightly higher cost to like you're investing in that customer in a way. That's the extra 5 points on the cost to market scale maybe. But tell me about the overall profitability of it's been up for everybody pretty much, but how has that flip to customer, the 70-30 split we talked about before, how has that affected profitability?
It's huge. It's huge for a number of reasons. First of all, you're moving more metal now because you're getting more trades, right? So, the great thing about acquiring a trade is you get a car deal. Right. So when you get that trade, or you make that deal to get the trade, you're getting a car deal with it. Now you're getting a really nice, desirable piece of inventory. So now your turns go up, your return on investment go up, everything goes up, right? And you're not having to deal with these auction cars, and you're not having to deal with waiting for these cars. And then a lot of times they don't come in the way that they were represented in the CR or whatever it may be, or you have a seller that's just trying to slip something through, and then the check engine, right? So profitability has skyrocketed, and we've been able to lower our average cost investment, which is good. And I always do analysis on different pieces of inventory, whether it be off lease or trades or auction buys or whatever. And the trades just crush it. the return on investment is so high on trades, it's just silly. Now, yes, the average cost is a little bit lower, so your margin isn't quite there, but you turn them so quick, and you're keeping those local customers, by doing that. So quantifiable, it's hard to really put a number on all of those different things,
Sure.
but the trades are where it's at. They're the best piece of inventory, and profitability has been very, very good.
I'm curious. I want to go back to a point you talked about a second ago. The standardized appraisal process. I presume, Brian, that was your job, was to make sure the standards are set and met. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's me. I have a hand in it, but
Okay.
it's our entire organization. It's
Okay.
the president, the vice president, the platform directors. We all have a goal and a vision on how we want things, and together as a team, then we go out and we make sure to communicate what we're looking for, and then we get the buy-in from the stores, and then we roll it out, and then that's just how it works. I believe I had the idea of just doing it that way, but I can't take credit for implementing it, because at 18 locations rolling this out, you can't do it one person, right? You got to do it from the top down, make sure everybody's bought in, and it's working great.
I want to go back a process question I probably should have asked earlier, but you talked about how you're getting leads, from customers through some of the Kelley Blue Book tools we talked about. What's the back end look like there, Brian? I mean, one of the things I've heard, some dealers, they've sort of woken up to the fact that there's this interest that nobody's touched. You have like leads hanging that nobody follows up on. So what's your process to make sure when somebody kind of raises a hand that you're engaging?
Yeah, so we have a BDC center.
Okay. Is it one for the whole group, or?
Yeah, so it's not a dealership. It's a separate facility that's actually in Sheboygan, and it's a great place. It's a large building. We have our centralized BDC for sales there. We have our centralized BDC for service there, and then we have our Van Horn Direct team there, as well as some other customer service type positions, and that way everything is run from there. We have a director that oversees it, and that way a customer doesn't get left. Somebody always gets, their question either gets answered, the phone gets answered, the email, the text, whatever it is, gets answered in a timely fashion, and that's like 5 minutes or less. A couple of them slip through the cracks for whatever the case is, but for the most part, we have, and these ladies and these gentlemen are awesome. They're very much customer focused. They understand why they're there. They want to get the information to the consumer as quick as possible, and then they turn it over to the correct store or the correct employee or service advisor or salesperson, whatever, as quick as possible, and as seamless as possible. We do run a centralized BDC for all the customer needs.
So just to help me understand, Brian, if with that team that's in there, do they take all comers, meaning they take any call, or are some is there a way to direct it so there's some specialization across that group?
Yeah, the way that, it's sourced so that, the phone numbers that the customer is calling goes to the right team. And so we have that split up by platform as well. We actually color code them. So the phone numbers go to this team, and it's all, it's all an intricate process, but it works. And that's a process too that, we've had to tweak and redefine. When you tell the stores that you're going to take the leads out of their location, can you imagine that? So that's never an easy thing either, but it works great. We love it. There was some growing pains in the beginning, but we'd never go back to having the leads coming back into the stores.
Would the naysayers on that initiative, and perhaps the folks who maybe weren't naysayers but pushed back on the standardized appraisal process we spoke of, are they all on board now, or are they gone?
No, yeah, well, that's a good point. Most of them are gone.
Okay. Okay.
But at the end of the day, you just have to think about the customer, and you got to put ego aside, and you got to take the control aside, and you got to go, what's the best for our customer?
Hmm.
Is it good for the customer to sit for 2 hours without getting, an answer, or do you just want the customer, to have some kind of interaction? For me, I'm a consumer. If I sit on the phone for 30 minutes on hold, listening to that silly music, I'm pretty agitated.
I would imagine. Yeah.
Right. But if
Yeah.
I get somebody on the phone that just says, hang tight, we're busy, we'll call you back, or hang, I'm like, cool, that's cool.
Hmm.
So when you just simply step back and go, what's best for the customer, you know what the answer is, right?
Yeah.
The answer is, let's just take care of them.
Yep. Yep. And that's a good segue, Brian. When I was kind of checking out the Van Horn website, I was struck by the motto that you guys have: empower people and amaze customers. And I guess I'm just curious, on a day-to-day basis, what does that motto mean for you?
Yeah. Thank you for looking at our site. Appreciate that. Yeah, that's our mission statement, and it's pretty simple, right? Empower people and amaze customers. And starting with the first part of it, our employees are our number one asset, absolutely. And this organization, this business doesn't happen without good people, and we have a ton of good people. And instead of micromanaging those people and watching their every move, we're trying to empower them to make their own decisions around the customer. And
Mm-hmm.
what we try to do is give the customer a world-class experience. And I know that that's a big fancy word, world-class experience, but at the end of the day, the customer just wants to be taken care of.
Yep.
Well, how do you do that? You let your people handle it. If somebody comes in and bought a car and their wiper blades are streaking and they just ripped, and it's 3 weeks after they bought the car, just do it. Don't ask. Don't worry about it. Put some new wipers on. Get the customer down the road, and the customer's going to go, well, that was amazing, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was amazing. I
Yeah.
didn't have to fight with anybody. I didn't have to sit there. They handled it. I'm on my way. I'm happy as can be. So you empower your people, and then the results are just you amaze your customers, and it's cool how it happens.
Hmm.
So that's our mission, and so we're striving to have that exact thing. Let our people handle it. Take care of our customers, and then business will be good. Profits will be just fine, and everybody's happy.
Now, we're in a moment here, Brian, in the first part of July 2021, where, from what I understand, the dealerships, because of the pandemic, had to lay folks off, or furlough people, and I believe we're at a point where maybe people are needed now, in dealerships. So I'm just curious if that mission statement, how do you guys use that as part of hiring, and does it have a tangible effect, or does it make a difference as you're trying to attract people to your dealership?
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely want people, especially if they're looking at coming aboard this organization, to know that they're going to have some power, right? And they're going to be able to help the customer when needed, and that it's not just about, how much money are you making for me today? It's more about taking care of the customer, doing the next right thing, and just being a good, transparent, honest process. And that in itself should be enough. Now, I'll say this. The employees here, when they do that, make plenty of money. So the compensation isn't that, yes, right? Compensation's a big thing, but if you do those things, you'll be compensated very well. And so, and a lot of our structure is based on customer service and CSI and things like that. And so, when you start compensating on that, not that you want people to do the right thing even though they don't want to, it just happens that way. We are an ESOP. We're an employee ownership dealer group, so that also helps. So the employees do own a portion of the organization, and that's a very cool thing. The owners decided that they wanted to give back to the people that helped grow the business, and so we are an employee owner auto group, the only one in Wisconsin. I think there's a few across the United States, but we're the only one in Wisconsin. So that's pretty cool.
That is cool. Yeah.
So everybody's got a little bit of skin in the game. And that also helps empower people, right?
Yeah.
So when they're an employee owner and they're part of this whole thing as well, it gives them, just as much, experience to do the next right thing, because they know it's their organization too.
Everybody's picking up the trash if there is any.
That's right.
Very cool. Thank you again, Brian, for taking the time. I have one other question I wanted to ask you, and this is really kind of, if we can, maybe peek inside your crystal ball here for a minute. But as you think about where your business is headed over the next couple of months, what are maybe the top two or three priorities that you have in mind that you'll undertake in the months ahead?
Yeah, so for us, we're kind of like that middle of the summer point, and so we're going to be implementing kind of a clean type strategy on the inventory. So let's shuffle some of the aged out of there. Let's free up some money so that we can go back and acquire some different units. So number one is just maintaining a really healthy inventory, and we're there. It was starting to flip a little bit about a month ago, so I started putting some things in place to kind of clean up. And so that's number one. Number two is really studying the market. So I believe the books are probably going to take a correction soon. So really watching the market. Wholesale is definitely, MMR and wholesale values are starting to reduce a little bit. The sellers aren't quite ready to sell what they have yet. They're trying to hold out, but once they do start selling, I think there's going to be a small correction, back to, I would just say normal levels. I don't really know what that means anymore, but they're gonna come down a little bit. Then the books will follow. So number two is continuing to just study the market, and so that we can pivot with whatever that looks like. And then number three is watching the new car, the manufacturers, and being dialed into Ford and GM and Hyundai and Kia and Stellantis, and who's got the chips, and when are we going to start seeing some inventory, because that is going to be the key to this whole thing.
Yes,
and
sir.
So even though I'm a used car guy, I'm watching the new just as much as I'm watching the used, because the new car or vehicle is going to become a value again soon.
Yeah.
Because right now you're paying more for a used car than a new car. Well, that doesn't make any sense, right? It makes zero sense. Right. So I'm watching closely, and is that 2 months? Is it 4 months? Is it going to be February, March of 2022? That's when this chapter is going to be finished and written, once the new car comes back. And honestly, I have no clue when that's going to be, but I'm watching it closely.
I'm curious. This might be putting you on the spot, Brian, but let's say that you found out that the chips are going to happen, and in 2 months you're going to have new car inventory. Let's just pretend that that's the case. So what's the first one or two things you might do on the used car side to adjust for what to be coming?
Start moving metal as fast as I can, and just and I do that anyways every day, right? But I mean, like I'm moving metal now, because like I said, the value is going to be there when the new inventory arrives, and so customers are then going to pivot back to the new car, because they're going to go, well, I'm just going to buy a new car. So that would be number one, is just moving metal. And then number two, or maybe this would even be number one, is communicating that across the organization. Right. And so everybody's up to date on what's happening. And then so when you change the strategy, or when you say this is what we're doing, everybody's not like, why are we doing that? Explaining to them, this is what's happening. We're going to shift. And then everybody understands. And then we can all march towards the same beat. And so we don't have all these stores going in different directions. And so those would be the two things that I would do.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Yeah, that's all right. Well, Brian, thank you very much for taking part in this podcast, sharing your insights and perspective. I appreciate you taking the time for us here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Me too. And folks, we hope you enjoyed this podcast. Until next time, stay well.